What are Minnesota caucus and conventions? We are one of a few caucus states that remain, and our convention, as we'll find out, is kind of a hybrid of the two. But for the most part, we are a caucus state, and so to go along with that, we'll get to the next slide, and we just have a general breakdown of what the Republican Party platform, or not platform, but kind of structure is. So, first of all, we have the precincts, we have the BPOUs, we have congressional districts, state party, national party, and each level has its own guiding constitution and bylaws that must be in compliance with those above it. So let's go to the next slide. So we have the grassroots. This is really a grassroots network. This is, we the people are the ones that get to take part of what our government is going to look like, who our leaders are going to be, and so on and so forth. It takes responsibility and accountability and action, but it has a real chance of letting us have a decision in the process, which is awesome. So everything starts with the grassroots, and all that starts at the precinct caucus. They happen every 2 years in February on the even years. Then we have the local Republican unit, which is called the BPOU and means Basic Political Operating Unit, basically the local Republican Club. So then we move up to the congressional district, the CDs. We have 8 in the state of Minnesota. We here are in CD 1. Then we come over to the state Republican Party, and then from there we move up to the national party. We also have a number of affiliates that kind of are interest groups that come and filter in and try to help, and they align with the party's values and principles. We have I think 10 to 12 current affiliate groups. So let's go on to the next page. So what is a BPOU? BPOU means Basic Political Operating Unit. We are called, what we call a local party organization can be referred to as the local Republican Club, a collection of precincts that serves to organize our political activities. In the metro, a BPOU is always, well, because of the size, it is organized as a legislative district. Usually a House, but it can usually a Senate, but it can also be a House district. Down here, in the outskirts of the metro, in the greater Minnesota, we are organized by counties. So we are, right here, currently, we are the Goodhue County BPOU. There's the Olmsted, there's the Dodge, the Wabasha, Winona. So we go by that. Up north, there's House District 58 BPOU, and so on and so forth. So let's go to the next slide. Oh, I guess if a county BPOU has more than 4 individual House districts within its borders, then it has to be divided into a smaller group. So that's why the metro has so many different distinctions. All right, so let's go on. So again, here we are, the Republican Party of Minnesota structure. This is the CD1 right here. These are all 8 different CDs. You can go to the Secretary of State website. It's under the elections tabs, the data and maps under the elections and administration. So you can go there and see all of the different maps and get a ton of more information on the Secretary of State website. Okay, so here we have kind of a breakdown again. Everything starts at caucus. February 27th is where this whole lineup of activity gets kicked off. And then you can decide where you want to kind of get off the stream, how far along you want to ride. You can either come and go to caucus and just stay there and elect people to go forward and represent your area later on. Or you can go to volunteer to be a delegate or an alternate and go on to the county BPOU convention, which then also we'd go on to the endorsing conventions. And then from the county convention, you can volunteer and be elected to go on to your CDs, your states, and then eventually the national. Each level is a smaller group and more difficult and usually more expensive. Each of the conventions do have some cost associated with them. We'll get into that probably a little bit later. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ted.
Okay, the caucus set up for 2 years, or a 2-year cycle. always on the even cycle. And you can see, to get involved, you go to the precinct caucus. If you're going to go on to those other levels, you have to get yourself elected as a delegate or a seated alternate in your precinct. If you don't do that on that night, on the 27th, you're out of the game. So when you go to your precinct caucus, say, hey, I want to be a delegate or I want to be an alternate. So then you've got the CD and the state and any endorsing conventions. You could be a participant in that. Our caucus night is February 27th on the 27th, and I think you all know where your location. We have 8 locations in Goodhue County. You other counties have divided your precincts up into locations too, I'm sure. So it should be well published. Precinct caucus. There's 3 things that we want to get accomplished at the precinct caucus. We want to elect and alternates and make the list, make sure it's correct. We want to elect precinct officers, a precinct captain and a secretary, so that we can energize and we can draw from our grassroots. When candidates are coming into town or we need a bunch of people to do something, we can find them, and we'll go to our precinct captains and secretaries to go ahead and recruit those. The third thing is resolutions. That's what makes the party our party, because we get to submit resolutions. If they pass, we want to make sure that the secretary in your BPO, in your caucus, we'll vote on it, discuss it, vote on it, check passed or failed, and then it goes on to the county convention where it's discussed once again and will be voted on again. And if it passes there, we'll go to the congressional district and discussed and passed there. And then it finally goes to the state, where if it's passed at the state, it becomes part of our Constitution, part of our bylaws. And that's how we grassroots control our party at the higher levels. So remember that. 3 things at the county caucus. We want to elect delegates and alternates, get our list right. We want precinct officers, and we want to do the resolutions. Next slide. Who can attend the precinct caucus? First of all, you got to make sure that you are in your right area and in the caucus, and you should have some maps and so on of the precinct to make sure that you're located in the right one. If you're going to be 18 on election day in November, on election day, even though you're not 18 sitting in the caucus, you're allowed to be there and be a participant and can be elected as a delegate or an alternate or any of those positions, as long as you're going to be 18 on election day in November. Oh, you do have to. There are some things about your philosophy. If you come to a Republican caucus, it's expected that you do have a kind of a Republican, or you're in agreement with most of the party's positions. And in your packet there will be what the party's positions are on all of those. So if you're not in agreement with those, you may be in the wrong caucus. And all the caucuses, all the parties hold their caucus on the same night, so it's difficult to go to more than one party. In fact, it's illegal to go to more than one party caucus on caucus night. You could get elected a delegate or an alternate if you had a family emergency or you weren't able to get there. There is a form to fill out if you have somebody that is in your precinct that will present that form and say that my neighbor here, John Doe, also wants to be a delegate or an alternate. So you can get elected a delegate and alternate even though you're not at the precinct caucus if you fill out one of those forms and have a reason that you were unable to attend. Alternates. A delegate is a delegate is a delegate. But an alternate, it depends. If you're going to replace a delegate, we want to know where you fell in the election process. And are you the first alternate, and then the second alternate, and the third alternate? so that when you go to a convention, if a delegate is gone, and you are at the convention as an alternate, and you might not even be the first alternate, you might be the third alternate, but the first and the second alternate didn't come either, and now there's an open seat, a delegate didn't show or had to go home, you will get pulled, and then you will be a seated alternate, and you will have all the powers of a delegate. If a delegate that does show up, then that would be in that caucus, then you might get put back on the sidelines, but at least you would be in position, for a short time. Election judges, some of those volunteer positions are very important. I'm an election judge up in Ramsey County because the way it's supposed to work is the county is supposed to have an even number of all the parties, even number of Democrats, Republicans, and they have some Green Party and so on, that should be at the polling places and be election judges at the polling places. I ran into the same party, I think same problem some of you might have run into, and that is your rural county say, oh, we're full, we don't need any election judges. But you could call Ramsey County, Hennepin County, and say, hey, I'm a Republican, would like to be an election judge, and they're duty bound to take your application into consideration. So I've been an election judge in Ramsey County now for 3 years.
On February 7th, it's 20 days before the caucus, the Secretary of State will put out a poll finder. You can go to the Secretary of State website or just kind of search caucus finder. And so the Secretary of State will have an area where you can fill out a form and find out exactly where your caucus is, where you're meeting, where you're locating, what district you're in, all of the information that you need. So, kind of a general overview of the caucus and conventions. It is, again, we kind of have the steps. We have the caucus, and that's in February of every even year. We go to the county BPOU convention, which is yearly. In year one, it's an endorsing convention. We elect delegates and alternates for the purpose of endorsement, to go on further for endorsements. Year two, we elect the party leadership. Then we go on to the legislative endorsing conventions. Some areas where they're made up of Senate districts or House districts, they'll have kind of a combined BPOU and endorsing convention all in one. But for us, as we'll see in a little bit, down here we need to split them up for sure. So we have the county BPOU convention, and then we have the legislative endorsing convention. Both of those are in the springs. Then we go on to the congressional district, the CDs. In year one, again, it's for the purpose of endorsing candidates. In year two, it's for the purpose of choosing leadership, party leadership. We go on to the state convention, which is the spring of even years. And then we go on to the national convention every 4 years. And so it was kind of brought up, when you want to volunteer to be a delegate, do you have to tell people who you are leaning towards? When it comes to a presidential candidate, when you finally get up in the presidential candidate, if you're going to run for a delegate to go to national, you get chosen at the CD or at the state. There's a couple different proportions. So there's 2 ways to go to the national convention, to run as a delegate at state or at the CD level. And at that time, you do have to declare who you're running for, who you want to be a delegate for. And all of that is determined upon the primary. So in the primary, if one candidate got 80% or more of the vote, then they get all of the delegate votes. And then if you go to national, on the first vote, you are declaring and agreeing to vote for that person who won the primary on the first round of voting of even years. And then we go on to the national convention every 4 years. And so it was kind of brought up, when you want to volunteer to be a delegate, do you have to tell people who you are leaning towards? When it comes to a presidential candidate, when you finally get up in the presidential candidate, if you're going to run for a delegate to go to national, you get chosen at the city or at the state. There's a couple different proportions. So there's two ways to go to the national convention, to run as a delegate at state or of even years. And then we go on to the national convention every 4 years. And so it was kind of brought up, when you want to volunteer to be a delegate, do you have to tell people who you are leaning towards? When it comes to a presidential candidate of even years, and then we go on to the national convention every 4 years. And so it was kind of brought up, when you want to volunteer to be a delegate, do you have to tell people who you are leaning towards? When it comes to a presidential candidate of even years, and then we go on to the national convention every 4 years. And so it was kind of brought up, when you want to volunteer to be a delegate, do you have to tell people who you are leaning towards? When it comes to a presidential candidate, when you finally get up in the presidential candidate, if you're going to run for a delegate to go to national, you get chosen at the city or at the state. There's a couple different proportions. So there's two ways to go to the national convention, to run as a delegate at state or at the CD level. And at that time, you do have to declare who you're running for, who you want to be a delegate for. And all of that is determined upon the primary. So in the primary, if one candidate got 80% or more of the vote, then they get all of the delegate votes. And then if you go to national, on the first vote, you are declaring and agreeing to vote for that person who won the primary on the first round of voting. If there's a candidate that, if no candidate got to 80%, then the delegates are proportioned out of even years. And then we go on to the national convention every 4 years. And so it was kind of brought up, when you want to volunteer to be a delegate, do you have to tell people who you are leaning towards? When it comes to a presidential candidate, when you finally get up in the presidential candidate, if you're going to run for a delegate to go to national, you get chosen at the city or at the state. There's a couple different of even years. And then we go on to the national convention every 4 years. And so it was kind of brought up, when you want to volunteer to be a delegate, do you have to tell people who you are leaning towards? When it comes to a presidential candidate, when you finally get up in the presidential candidate, if you're going to run for a delegate to go to national, you get chosen at the city or at the state. There's a couple different proportions. So there's two ways to go to the national convention, to run as a delegate at state or at the CD level. And at that time, you do have to declare who you're running for, who you want to be a delegate for. And all of that is determined upon the primary. So in the primary, if one candidate got 80% or more of the vote, then they get all of the delegate votes. And then if you go to national, on the first vote, you are declaring and agreeing to vote for that person who won the primary on the first round of voting. If there's a candidate that, if no candidate got to 80%, then the delegates are proportioned out according to the percentage of who got what. And so that time, certain delegates will go for, this year, Haley, or for Trump. And so, like at CD1, maybe Trump got most of the votes, but Haley got enough to beat out the 80%. So one delegate would go to Haley and two delegates would go to Trump. And so then people have to run according to which candidate they want to go to national convention for. And we'll talk again about this later, and maybe Ted can explain it a little bit better than I can. So he's the next person who will, and, oh, here we go, your turn.
Thank you, Sarah. These two slides are really about what the delegates and alternates expect in the 2-year cycle between the precinct caucuses. So in year one, that would be an even numbered year. That's when we're going to elect delegates and alternates in all of the different levels, BPU, state, and the CD district. Resolutions are considered. That would actually could change our party platform. When we get all of those resolutions, we do tend to take them for the county convention and put some of them together. If they're really the same, a resolution except a little bit of different wording, we make it one resolution. So we don't have to vote on two very similar resolutions at the convention. Let's see, is this the next slide? Year two. Just one other thing. Sarah was talking about being a delegate at the national convention, and depending on how the state primary election went, you may have to say that you support a particular candidate because they got enough votes to get some delegates, and then you have to be one of those delegates, even though you may not want to be, but you're pledged. If you're elected to go to the national convention, you're pledged to vote for that delegate, at least on the first round, and then you're free to vote any way you want. But you have to vote for the delegate you are pledged to on the first round. Any other questions? Yeah, next slide. Here's some unique stuff. In Olmsted County, you said, oh, you got to make sure that you know all the inside rules and you get your name on the list or you're nobody. So in Goodhue County, back a number of years ago, some of the out-county people who are good conservatives complained and said everything goes to Red Wing because they got all the people and that's the way it works. So we divided the BPOU into county commissioner districts so that we get equal representation all the way around the county. And we do cross seats sometimes from one commissioner district to another, but it tends to even out the representation throughout the county. And that's unique, I think, to Goodhue County. I don't know of any other county that divides their BPOU up into those commissioner districts.
And we're going to kind of do a mock-ish walkthrough of the Goodhue County Convention. Alrighty, so it looks like we got all of our delegates chosen from our areas that we chose from this site area, but as we can see, there's still some open seats. So it looks like some maybe in other precincts, they weren't able to, not all of their delegates were able to make it. So first of all, when an alternate is going to fill in, they first fill in for their precinct first. Is usually how it goes. And then we cross seat as long as it's all within our commissioner district. So let's see, we need alternates number ones. If you guys are an alternate number one, come on up. So this is the county convention. So we're just going to do a mock-up of the state delegates. So we have 3 state delegates and 3 state alternates. So do I have a volunteer who wants to be a state delegate? There we go. We have in the past had people volunteer to be an alternate, but the thing is, usually when we get our tellers ready. Teller, are you ready? Ready. There you go. So there have been some people who have just automatically volunteered to be an alternate. The thing is, because the alternates are numbered, it's best to put in and on, and then people know during your speech, like, I prefer being an alternate, then you most likely get as many votes and stuff. If you are seated, you have every single right as a delegate. Exactly, you are now a delegate. So maybe the teller could pass out some paper and pens, And as people are giving their speeches, we have 3 slots. So you have up to 3 votes to vote for the person that you want to go on. And if it's yourself, vote for yourself. All right, I think Matt's itching to go. I see his eyes. There you go. So we need to give a 30-second speech of why people should vote for you to go to state as a delegate.
Right now?
Yep, right now.
This is part of it? Jeez. Good evening, everybody. I want to go to state because I want to make Donald Trump our next president. Does that work?
That works? So if you guys wanted Matt, then write his name down, or if you're still thinking.
I came up here because everybody else is too afraid to get up and talk in front of people. So I want to go to state because I believe in freedom, and I think our Constitution is eroding, and we need to protect it.
And what's your name?
Steve
There you go. Steve, what's your last name?
Voigt.
There you go. We got another volunteer.
I volunteer to go to state because I think it's important for conservative, independent women to stand up and have our voices be heard in our government. And I think it's really important that all voices are heard, and I believe really strongly in grassroots and never ever censoring the voice of the people.
Good job. Woo. All right, who else wants to volunteer? Oh, yeah.
Andrea McClure.
Andrea M.
Now, Andrea, as a seasoned politician who lost and won, your end of your speech should always be, please vote for Andrea, or whatever your name is. Ask for the vote. Who else is going to go to state? Who else?
Yeah, I want to go to state because I feel like an election is an election, and we may as well have 4 people for 3 places. And vote for Ellen.
There you go.
Good job. Any other volunteers? We also have alternate positions. All right, so we have Matt. We have Andrea. We have Steve. We have Ellen, right? Ellen? Good, Ellen. All right, do we have a 5th person who wants to go to state? There we go.
Okay, I'm Rose, and I've had the experience of going to state before, and I thought it was an exciting opportunity, and I like the opportunity of representing our area, and I love the election process, and so vote for Rose.
We have Andrea. We have Matt. We have Ellen. We have Steve. We have Rose. So take a few minutes. You can vote up to 3 because we have 3 delegate positions. Another point of interest is that in some counties, they combine the 2. So they combine the delegates for state and congressional district. So if you get voted to state, you're also voted in as at congressional district. Here in Goodhue, we split them up. But again, every BPOU is different. So let's see, we had, if I'm remembering correctly, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 positions. So that means that we have 1 position left to be the last alternate. Who would like to volunteer to be the last alternate? You don't have to give a speech. Do we have any volunteers? Woohoo! There we go. So you are automatically alternate 3.
Okay, so we got the results. So we have Andrea with 10, Steve with 10, Matt with 8. So that would be our delegates.
Awesome.
And then Rose had 5 and Ellen had 3. So we got our alternate would be Rose, and second alternate would be Ellen.
Well, thank you very much. I think that concludes this portion of the walkthrough. We can take your seats. Thank you very much. That's a good question, Rose. So the 2-year commitment is the county one. If you got elected at Caucus to go to your county, you are there for 2 years. The legislation for the endorsing, that's just one time. You're elected at caucus to go to these two, both the endorsing and the county. The county happens again the next year. At the county, you're elected to go on to congressional, and then you're elected to go on to state. Some counties split them up, so there's two different elections, elections. Some counties combine them. So if you're a delegate, you go to both. So it's dependent upon county. Goodhue, we have a slate, or we have like nominations for congressional CD, and then we have nominations for state. So the one that we went through is state. And you're right, state is just that 1 year, because that's the state endorsing convention. For congressional district, the CD1, the first year is endorsing a candidate, and then the second year is choosing CD level leadership. So CD and county, those are the two that if you get elected to that, you're committed for 2 years. On the second year, when you're at your county BPOU, then you get elected to things like the central committees, which are the leadership committees. And again, at every single level, there's a leadership committee at the county level, at the CD level, at the state level, and then at the national level. The national level is a little special. Their leadership, instead of being 2 years, is 4 years. So anytime you come together, you can have a constitutional convention. Thank you for bringing that up. Usually, a constitutional convention happens in the second year because endorsing takes so much time and everything. A constitutional convention can happen anytime there's a convention, but usually it is in the second year. Some counties are like, thank you for bringing that up. So at caucus, if you're elected a chair of your precinct, then that makes you in the leadership for the 2 years. For some, we have, again, split up by commissioner districts, and we have certain voting members. So again, you have to find out from your county which way you do it. So thank you for bringing that up. There's all these nuances because we are Republicans and we love to be individuals and be independent thinkers, and therefore we all do things slightly differently. All right, so legislative endorsing, it happens every 2 years. This year, we just have the House candidates. In 2 years, we'll also have the Senate districts. So yada, 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 let's see. Oh, so candidates need a 60% of the vote to get the endorsement. Otherwise, there's no endorsement, and it goes straight to primary. No endorsement is different than unendorsed. So an unendorsed candidate is one who chooses to challenge the endorsed candidate enforce a primary. Again, this decision should not be taken lightly since it does not help the party and causes division oftentimes. So, and again, we're a caucus system. It's our job as delegates to vet these candidates, to choose wisely. And so a lot of people do not appreciate it when someone decides to run against the endorsed candidate. There's a few times that it has happened and has been successful, but as we saw last year, we lost a couple races because of so much division. And again, we're putting a lot of time and effort into vetting these candidates, to working for them, to getting out and trying to promote our candidate, and so we get very emotionally invested. So it is sometimes hard when our candidate loses, but that makes it even more difficult when it goes onto a primary, and it's like we really need to start getting together and focus on the general, and that's hard to do when we go on to a primary. Again, if the delegates are really undecided and they're like, both of these candidates are good, we're kind of up in the air, then if a candidate cannot get to that 60% needed, it goes to automatic primary. Next slide. So again, here is for Goodhue County, here is our Goodhue County. These are our current legislators and our congressmen and the division of 58, 20, 19, 20B, all the different House districts. So next slide. And that's, if you can see it, it's a picture of a Senate district. It encompasses This is Senate District 20, and it encompasses 5 different BPOUs. That's why we have separate endorsing conventions, because we have to all get together, and yes, it makes things nice and interesting. All right, let's go to the next slide. Congressional district. I think we're going to hand it over to Ted.
Congressional districts, year one. I think Sarah covered most of this. Elected at the BPOU, vote on endorsement for Congress, nominate one elector candidate for the Electoral College, and elect 3 delegates to the RNC National Convention for candidates when somebody doesn't get 80% or all the delegates. Consider resolutions passed from the BPOUs and may make amendments to the CD Constitution, cross-seating within the BPOUs. Does anybody have any questions on that? Congressional District Convention on the alternate year, then of course elect congressional leadership, which includes the executive committee, the chair, secretary, treasurer, Senate district representatives to the state executive committee.
State convention. Okay, so again, this is very similar to all the other conventions. We have, if you want to go to state, you have to be elected at the BPOU convention. The state convention is usually about 2 days. There's lots and lots of speakers, lots of activity, lots of fun stuff. They may vote on amendments to the state constitution. Let's see, state convention decides statewide office endorsements. So this year we have the U.S. Senate. So also at the state convention this year, we're going to nominate 2 electoral candidates to the Electoral College, and then we're also going to elect 12 national convention delegates. The state gets an additional 3, but they automatically go to the party chair and the national chairwoman and chairman. So that is like the national representation of leadership from our state to national. And so also what we're going to do is elect the national committee chairman and chairwoman, and that's a 4-year term. Cross-seating, it depends again on the convention rules, but usually is done within CDs, or it may be restricted to the BPOU. I've seen it done both ways.
Thank you, Sarah. National Republican Convention, I think you covered this. Minnesota has 39 delegates that will go to the National Convention to Milwaukee. So, you would have to throw your hat in the ring, make a speech like some of you did here, and explain why you want to vote. And we did talk about, depending on if somebody doesn't get 80% of the vote, then the vote gets divided, and maybe a seat that's available is not who you're supporting, but you still want to go. So you have to agree that on your first vote at the convention, you're going to vote for this person you represent, and that's how you got your seat. After that, you're free to support any candidate that you want at the national convention.